Hi, in this episode we are going to see how this works in JavaScript. This has been a source of a lot of confusion in JavaScript, so we will take a detailed look at how this works. So let's start with a very simple function. So here we have a function vehicle, and I'm going to use strict and just do console.log this. We are going to invoke vehicle. Let's run with the JavaScript, and we get the value undefined. So in the strict mode, the value of this is undefined, and if you remove use strict, then the value will be if you go to the top, we can see the value is the global object. I recommend always to use a strict, so that is what we will stick with. So if you use a strict mode, then this is undefined if at the call site there is no object on which this method is being invoked. So in order to understand this, we need to take into account a simple rule, and that rule is that in order to determine what the value is of this is, we need to look at the call site. Call site means the point at which the function was actually invoked. Nothing else governs this. There are exceptions, and we will look at those exceptions in the upcoming videos, but the general rule is that this is governed by the call site. In the case where at the call site there is no explicit object on which the function is invoked, then this will be undefined in the strict mode. So now let's work on another example. So here what we will do is we will define an object called car, where car is an object, and it will have the property vehicle, which is a function, and I will copy this function. So let's indent it properly, and then it has a property called color, called red, and since this is an assignment statement, it has to end with a colon, and then we will do car.vehicle. So now if you look at the call site, there is this object called car. So when we invoke this dot color, it will look for color in this. What is this? Then this is the call site. At the call site, if you look at the call site, this is the object car, and it will look for color in the object car, and it will get the property. So let's run the code, and we have console.log this, and it's saying that this is an object. So in order to reduce all that noise, I will get rid of the strict also. So now it's much cleaner. We run the code, and we see the value red. So this is governed by the object at the call site, and in this case there is an object, and we invoke on that object. So that works. Now let's add a complexity by adding a layer of indirection. So what we'll do is that instead of calling directly the vehicle, we will call the method called transportation. Okay, and since there is no method called transportation, we are going to add that method. Transportation is another function. Okay, and this transportation this function will do nothing, but it will just call the function vehicle, and vehicle in turn will call the method this dot color. So if we run this code, we get the value red, and there is no problem, because we call transportation, and for the transportation, this is, if you look at the call side, it's car, so it's basically car.vehicle, and car has a vehicle, and in the vehicle, once again, it is this. So in order to determine what this is for vehicle, it has to look at what is the call side for vehicle is this. And if you look at the call side, the object on which this function is getting invoked is car here. So for this it's car.color. Okay, so we can have a nested functions, one function calling another and the second calling the third one. So in order to determine the value of this in the third function, we need to look at the call side of the second function, and in order to determine this for the second function, we need to look at the call side of the first function. That's how it works. So far so good. Now let's try to, so here it is calling this dot color and it's coming up as red. So now let's try to change the color by putting a variable color is equal to black. So what we are trying to do here is that we are calling the function transportation, and the transportation is putting a local variable color black and is calling the vehicle, and the vehicle is calling this dot color. So what do you think would be the result? If we run this function, then the result is red. The result is red because ultimately the vehicle function is called, and when the vehicle function is called, then this for the vehicle is car, and car dot color is red. So this statement, it's a valid statement, it is not put to use. Now let's try to add this code here. Now what do you think will happen? Let's clear it and try to run with JavaScript. We still get the value red. We get the value red because of the same logic. When the call is made here, if you look at the call site, we'll see that the call site is car. Here this is car. So for this vehicle function also, the call site, the object at the call site is car, so it is calling car.color. So if you look at the car, and car has the color red. So once again, this statement is totally ignored. Okay, so far so good. Now let me remove these variable assignments, and now we are back to running our code, and it's working perfectly. So one last thing I want to discuss is, what do you think will happen if I remove this? Do you think we will get the result red? Let's try it. We get an error that vehicle is not defined. If you're coming from programming languages like Ruby, then this might surprise you a little bit, because in Ruby, if you don't have a self, then the code assumes that there is an implicit self. That is not the case with JavaScript. If there is no this, then this is not assumed. So what's the difference between when this is there and when this is not there? So when this is not there, then we need to go back and look at our episode where we discussed lexical scoping, and we need to think in terms of lexical scoping, because when this function is executed, then it will look for this variable vehicle inside this function. But if that variable is not found, how would JavaScript go about looking for that variable? It will go to the outer function, and in the case of outer function is the global one. So in this case, it does not find vehicle, and it does not and is not able to execute. It doesn't find vehicle, and that's why we get the reference error. So once again, let me show you. If I use this, so if you put this back, then we get the result red. We get the result red because by putting this the JavaScript runtime is looking for variable vehicle in the object car. But if we remove this, then the runtime is looking for the variable vehicle not in the car but outside this function, and that will be the global function, the global window object. So, and then this, without this, the variables are resolved based on lexical scoping, and with this, the variables are resolved based on the call site. So that's a major difference which we need to keep in mind, and this is one area where JavaScript dramatically differs from other programming languages, and that, it seems to me, is the root cause of a lot of confusion in the JavaScript community about what actually this is. In the upcoming episodes, we would be looking at a few more examples of this, and also we would see how this can be overridden. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.